If you want the most realistic guns in virtual reality, then you want to get Hot Dogs, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades, which is a gun simulator with hundreds of guns, all modelled to the finest detail, with bullets that actually go into the chamber and get fired out with full physics. But realism doesn't always make the best games, and I want to highlight some of my favourite guns across a few VR games that are built with VR in mind. Real life guns can be very intricate, with small levers for putting the bullet in the chamber. Being able to have your in-game virtual hands grab and manipulate these parts can be difficult for developers to do in a polished way that doesn't look or feel janky. This is actually why Hot Dogs, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades still doesn't have in-game hands. They use floating see-through orbs. You've also got to consider that not everybody knows or really cares that much about guns in real life, especially outside of America, and having to learn all these intricacies and trying to manipulate the guns in the heat of battle can be difficult for those that aren't gun nuts. So let me show you weapons that have been made from the ground up with VR in mind, and explain why I think these are the best guns in virtual reality, and then you can leave me a comment telling me I'm wrong. Pistols work very well in VR. Most developers have got these dialed in now. The magazine ejects directly from where my hand is holding the gun. You bring a new one under your hand, and then you've got a big moving part on the top which can be grabbed and pulled back to rack a slide. Revolvers can also feel great. Like in Half-Life 2 VR mod, to reload the revolver, you press the eject button to open the barrel. You tilt the gun up to empty the casings, insert a new clip, then flick the hand to close it again. This process feels really satisfying in VR, especially the flick of the hand. A recent VR game with a custom revolver is Vertigo 2, an incredible single-player story-driven shooter with some of the best custom weapons in VR. The eject button causes the front of the gun to drop forward and the barrel will pop out. Then you can grab a new one, drop it in from the top, then simply flick the wrist to close it. This was my personal favourite weapon in the game because not only was it powerful, but the reload just never gets old because of that satisfying movement when you're closing it. Valve also recognised this in testing, which is why they have a one-handed shotgun with a very similar system. The front drops down, you then load shells from the top, then with a flick of the wrist, you then flick it closed and pull the charge handle if empty. You could also grab and physically close it from underneath and from top, giving the players options on how to close it. Vertigo 2 also has an energy pistol which uses liquid in a test tube for its ammo. Just like the other guns, you eject the tube which pops out. You grab a new vial, then insert it from the front. It's got a really nice animation, which feels very smooth as you bring your hand to the gun, and it feels in sync with your own hand movements. Having a clear tube with liquid as ammo is a really neat way of letting the player know how much ammo they've got left without the need for a digital ammo counter. A couple of other games have one-handed weapons that use power cells you insert from the side, like Defector, a PC Oculus exclusive. You eject the cell which pops out of the side, then you grab a new one and throw it into the side. This has a really slick feel to how it inserts and automatically lets go once in. You can actually reload this gun very quickly. Half-Life Alyx also has an SMG with a similar reload. You can't actually eject it, it auto ejects when it's empty, and then you can insert the cell which has got its own carrier which then drops automatically when inserted. I already mentioned Half-Life Alyx's shotgun, but there are some games with two-handed shotguns that are made with VR in mind. A traditional shotgun, you'll have to manually load the shell from underneath one by one, then you pump between shots. This can be fiddly to always get the shell in the right place, and also, knowing how many shells are actually in the gun can be problematic. Half-Life Alyx has an audible cue to let you know when the gun is full. Vertigo 2 uses liquid like the pistol, and you've got a canister that you bring in from the top, and depending on how many shots the gun has left, depends on how long the hand holds the canister before it fully reloads. This is also a pump action shotgun, and the movement between shots feels great in VR. Larcenauts, a VR hero multiplayer shooter, has got loads of custom guns. They've got a shotgun which has got a really heavy kick one-handed, so you really need to use both hands. It auto pumps each shot, then you eject the magazine, bring in a new one, and then you have to grab and manually close the frame to finish the reload. They also have a heavy machine gun where you drop out the old drum, bring the new one in from the bottom, and then you pull a large handle that sits on top of the gun. Vertigo 2 has got a full auto rifle with a switch on the side where you can change the rate of fire of the weapon. To reload, you press the eject button, which drops the drum down, but it doesn't actually release it. You can then either grab the old drum and throw it away, and then bring the new one, or you can use the new one to knock the old one out, and then bring it up from the bottom. Knocking the old one out and then bringing the new one up is another example of a satisfying hand movement. It has an alien entity type weapon, likely inspired by Half-Life 1, where you feed it balls, and then it spits them out, which end up turning into sticky grenades. Another thing that I'd really like to see more in VR games are upgradable weapons. Half-Life Alyx did this with upgrades for all the weapons. My favourites were the shotgun with the auto loader, which was a rack on the side that you can load shells into. Then when you need to reload, you press a button to drop the front and it automatically feeds the shell into the gun with a really nice animation. You then flick the gun to finish the reload. You also had a grenade attachment for the front, where you could turn it into a grenade launcher by moving the grenade to the end of the barrel. Vertigo 2 has also got upgrades. My favourite gun was the Magnum, which has got a bunch of upgrades, and each upgrade adds visual attachments. You can add a laser sight for improved accuracy, a heatsink to increase the rate of fire. There's an add-on which gives the last shot before empty 3 times the power. There's a stabilising fan which works really nicely with the scope attachment. If you press the trigger halfway, it activates the fan, which dampens your hand movement, so when you need to aim down the scope, you can fine tune the aim easier. The last thing I'll talk about is having guns with alt fire modes. Defector is the best example of this, with a level where you get a shotgun that can be transformed into a smart sniper by pulling a lever on the side. This gives it a dual use. You've got shotgun for close range and then sniper for long range. They then built an entire section of the game around this gun, with enemies coming at you close range, so you need to use the shotgun, but also longer range, where the shotgun is useless, so you need to change on the go depending on the situation. I think developers should be more creative, rather than just the usual pistol, SMG and assault rifle. Make guns with VR in mind, try to give each gun its own identity, and focus on how the player will interact with the gun. I also think guns and their abilities should be designed alongside levels, so to make sure that when you get a new weapon, a level is built to show off the weapon's strengths, and also design enemies so that they have strengths and weaknesses depending on the weapon that you use, forcing players to switch it up. Doom Eternal was a great example of this, with weak spots on some enemies that can make some harder enemies much easier to kill. Like the Arachnotrons that have got a heavy turret on top, which you can remove with a sticky grenade from the shotgun alt fire, or a scoped shot from the rifle. A well-timed grenade will make a Cacodemon eat it and instantly stagger for an easy glory kill. Some enemies have energy shields, which can be shut down by overloading them with a plasma rifle, giving you an opportunity for a kill. Half-Life Alyx played with this a little bit, with weak spots on some zombies, which if you shot them, would instantly kill them. The gas canisters on the back of some of the Combine, you had a small valve on the top of the tank, and it's surprising how you can still pick it off even from a distance, so don't be afraid to make weak spots harder to hit. The antlions needed to be killed limb from limb, and then finish off with the body. An idea that I had for a gameplay mechanic was to use some sort of leash, like in Bulletstorm, so you whip it out of your hand, and it can attach onto things and then yank it back. This could be used for grabbing objects from a distance, grabbing small enemies and sending them flying for a melee kill. You could have environmental hazards you could use to your advantage. You could also have enemies with armor plating, which you have to leash onto them and pull off before you can kill them. You could build levels and enemies around this gameplay mechanic, adding things like grappling points where you can grapple across gaps, and gradually introduce these new gameplay mechanics over time to keep the gameplay fresh and interesting. I guess the point of this video is that while realistic weapons can work well in VR, I feel like developers aren't thinking outside the box enough to really make use of VR and make games that play to its strengths, and also make guns that are fun and easy to use. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you prefer guns to be more realistic, or would you prefer to see more creativity with custom guns that have been designed with VR in mind from the ground up? As always, thank you for watching this video. If you want to support the channel, then consider subscribing, and if you're feeling very generous, I do have a Patreon with tiers starting at $1 per month.